I have a little bit of information on that, and I can either give it when you want me to testify, or I can jump in now. It's your preference. So.
Let's go ahead and, if you want to add to the answer for Senator Escobar.
Sure. Senator Escobar, I think there are two things going on. First, just to be aware, from a law enforcement perspective, to the extent that there is a provider who is envisioning themselves as a source of opioids, and in other words, an individual prescribing for reasons that I think can be proven to be inconsistent with pain management. There are other criminal statutes, and there are ongoing investigations in this state, both as part of our efforts and our efforts in cooperation with the Drug Enforcement Administration. Now, the harder question, and I think this is what Senator Escobar is getting at, is, well, what about somebody who comes in and says, I'm in pain, and they're prescribed an opioid pain reliever, but it turns out they're receiving that same pain reliever from 3 or 4 different places, and the concern is not one of intentional sale by the prescriber, but rather lack of attention. And I think to a certain extent, some of those questions are going to be taken out of our hands in Wyoming altogether, although there are still ways for us to be involved. The Centers for Disease Control have, just in the last month, issued draft provider guidelines. This is something that a number of states who are to this point much more affected by the opioid challenges have been pushing for, and I think, I'd be awfully surprised if we don't see a finalization of some sort of draft prescribing guidelines for opioids. And I think what you're going to increasingly see, and it's going to be either through government regulation or it's going to be through our tort system, you're going to see increasing standards imposed upon physicians and requirements that when they prescribe an opioid pain reliever, that they have a management plan, that they do so in ways that are sensitive to the potentials for long-term addiction and abuse. Does that answer your question, Senator? Thanks a lot.
Anyone else from the on the conference call side of it from the committee? All right, we'll take it to the committee here. Senator Kinski. Let's try and get around that. If you'll speak up loud, we'll try.
Okay. I don't know whether this is for Ms. Panos or Mr. Nepper, but following up on the question about physician prescription, it's my understanding the Board of Pharmacy has monitoring mechanisms in place now.
Just a second, Dave. Can everyone on the conference call hear Senator Kinski?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I can.
Yes.
Okay.
And I appreciate that the feds will soon tell doctors how they need to prescribe painkillers, but this question, I didn't hear an answer to, and maybe it was there and I missed it, Senator Escobar's hypothetical of a single patient obtaining multiple opioid prescriptions from multiple doctors, filling them at multiple pharmacies. Is there currently a mechanism to catch that? I hate to start picking on doctors if there's a much easier, readier fix.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I think the answer is right. Is that you're right, sir? The solution that many states are turning toward is a prescription drug monitoring program, and Wyoming has one. I think we are not yet at the level that we need to be at. Without that's not to point fingers at anyone. We have to acknowledge that we have some challenges, and that we are not entirely overrun with large national chains for whom the process of implementing a reporting system is already absorbed within their research and development dollars and their store structure. We have, and I think we in Wyoming want to continue to have local pharmacies run by local individuals who have been a part of the community for many, many years and who provide services that are very important. And I think our key challenge has been and continues to be how to ensure that those pharmacies are able to report in a way that is still economically efficient for them. I'll just note that the regulations for the prescription drug monitoring program give you an idea of some of the challenges that were, when it was originally set up. You know, they talk about reporting through things like a computer modem with a rate of 2400 baud or more, a computer disk, a cassette containing magnetic tape, or a paper printout. Now, I think the reality is that in most parts of Wyoming, none of those would be used to communicate electronic data to the prescription drug monitoring program, save a modem with considerably higher transmission rate. And so I think that this is going to be an opportunity for us to talk, and for the committee to talk with the prescription drug board of pharmacy, but also with the pharmacies, because I think it's important that they have an opportunity, and I think that is the secret, right? The secret is for doctors to be told, look, you need to check, and then for the information to be gathered such that they can actually do so in a timely manner. Remembering that sometimes the challenge is an urgent care one. In other words, somebody's come into an urgent care clinic, and you know, this is the first and last time you're going to see a patient, but you're seeing a patient who presents with symptoms of deep pain. And the question is, how do you, as a pharmacist or as a prescriber, handle that, and handle that in a way that ensures that somebody who truly has lost their medication, is in deep pain, is treated well, whereas someone who's shopping is not given the same opportunities.
Senator Kinsky, follow up.
Yes, just one follow on that, and this would be for Ms. Panos, you were going to come back to us with more information about first responders, including police officers having Narcan available to prevent overdose deaths, and the need for legislation to do that. So we've talked about opioid deaths, we've talked about catching opioid abusers. I'd like, when you come back, also to talk to us a little bit about curing opioid addicts, and specifically as long as you're researching drugs. It's my understanding there's one called Vivitrol, that we have a number of drug treatment programs across the state. It's my understanding that where Vivitrol is used in conjunction with therapy, that it substantially increases the success rate on getting these folks off of drugs, with the presumption they're being sent to treatment as a consequence of getting caught up in the criminal justice system. It's also my understanding that due to expense, the only patients that get that are those who have insurance, which would be relatively few. And I wonder if you might obtain some data for us on there as to how we might not only catch these folks, but get them off the dope completely. And that would be this Vivitrol, to my understanding. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Panos.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, definitely we'll make sure that we have that information. I know that the Behavioral Health Division of the Wyoming Department of Health has just received a $1 million SAMHSA grant in order to have more treatment available, and it is with these other drugs in combination with some standard treatment that they hope will help the situation greatly. But I can definitely have more information on you next time about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Panos.
All right, Representative Croker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question I'm wondering if any of this has been considered. A couple of years ago in the House Judiciary Committee, we heard a bill on cannabis derived pain medication that was in a liquid form that you could not get high from. We had testimony from a doctor that, it was safer than opioids, it was less addictive, and didn't have the effects where you could get high off it. Is that considered a remedy for opioid abuse? It seems to me if we have something that's a safer alternative that doesn't have the street value, it might be an easier solution to the problem.
Mr. Knepper, Ms. Panos, either?
I'll that one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that is, first I would just note that you know, as we're initiating this policy process, the answer is everything's on the table. I would note that you know, some of the challenges with a cannabis-derived medication is that we first would expect, and I think if doctors are going to prescribe the DEA would expect that they be FDA approved for those purposes, which is true for opioids. I'm not sure that it's true for the cannabis-derived pain medication. And if it is, then you know, with the studies and the FDA approvals, that changes how we would address it. I mean, I do know Mike Reed's going to be talking more generally about some of the you know, the work that's been done on the governor's marijuana initiative this past year, a little later this morning, and I think he's going to be able to answer at least some of the questions generally about where that group at least is coming with its policy recommendations and its study. You know, but the answer is, well, you know, I think everybody's willing to look at anything. I think we have to have responsibility as people who serve the people of Wyoming to do what's right for them. You know, there are going to be some challenges with medication that's not approved and tested by the Food and Drug Administration.
Thank you. Other questions for Ms. Panos or Mr. Nepper from the panel? Okay. All right, and Mr. Reed just walked in the middle of that commentary. I'm glad in the early comments you referred to his 45 minutes of expert testimony you'd be giving us.
Yeah, I suspect he's probably walking back out now.
We're all good. Okay. Mr. Nepper.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to try to repeat what Ms. Panos said. I just want to give a couple of additional highlights because I think we all want to have an opportunity to move forward with this. I guess first is the number that was most troubling to me is that of, you know, the statistic I read recently was 125 overdose deaths a day in the United States generally, and of which 78 are from opioids. So we're looking at a significant percentage of the irreversible consequences of drug abuse. You know, we have, I'm sure, many of us have had struggles with individuals addicted to substances, both legal and illegal, and the challenges of getting them clean. You know, of course, the tragedy is when that struggle is over and the individual has never been able to get clean. And opioids really have a potential for death that transcend some of the other drugs that we're dealing with on a daily basis. And let's identify, it's heroin. I mean, heroin is the challenge. But one of the things we're seeing with some of the statistics is that the prescription opioids become for some people a gateway into heroin use. You know, one of the studies points out that about 80% of people who are recent heroin users have moved there from prescription opioid abuse. So it's not to say that everyone who uses opioids becomes a heroin user, but that this is clearly a pathway that we as a society need to address. And we need to address it while recognizing that, you know, many individuals receive opioids as a standard course of pain care and pain management. And there are a number of very, very painful surgeries. I mean, the fortune of having a tonsil removed at age 44, and I can tell you that's not something that anyone should want. And you know, and opioids are part of that pain relief. The challenge is making sure that individuals don't become dependent on that and don't even seek it out. You know, I think the governor's office talked about most of the policies that are being pursued nationally. One that I would add on is most states, and Wyoming is not one of them, have some sort of Good Samaritan law. This is increasingly being created. And the idea here is, and this is a judicial, this is a legislative policy call, that there would be some level of immunity for people reporting overdoses. Often what happens is that individuals who are around other addicts, if somebody's overdosing, there's a fear of reporting the overdose lest they get caught up. And states have a number of policy initiatives that would, in some circumstances, forgive sort of low-level status type offenses with for reports you would get immunity. It wouldn't be something where if the police show up with an arrest warrant, you can suddenly announce what's going on and receive judicial immunity for large quantities of controlled substances. But there are some circumstances, other states are testing that, and that's something that we expect to be coming forward to you in the future. The naloxone, we're one of 3 states, Montana, Wyoming, and Kansas are the only 3 states currently that don't have some form of availability statutorily for Narcan naloxone. Recognizing that and I can just tell you from my perspective, it is something that the first responders and certainly the law enforcement community within DCI is very interested in, and also the crime lab response tax, because the risks of exposure, when processing a crime scene, among other things, are such that it's part of a safety kit that we think would be very helpful. Recognizing what I'm sure all of you are thinking, which is that none of this is free. It has to be accommodated within Wyoming's current budget situation. I would just add on that the coroner reporting is also going to be something that we're going to want to talk about. But as I'm sure that the county commissioner, if he's there, it's one thing for us to say we want a bunch of information from the county coroner. It's another thing for us to say we want a bunch of information from the county coroner. And by the way, the county's going to have to pay for it. And testing and reporting. However, we do think there's more that can be done to identify the causes of drug overdose deaths. Now, as far as the enforcement side of things, there is no question that there are enforcement actions, and there's going to be increasing need in this arena. I talked briefly with the crime lab folks, and to give you an idea, last year of our drug chemistry analysts, we had 148 times we identified, they bring a drug to us 148 times. That would be, that was heroin. Now we're looking at, just for the first quarter of this year, 2016, 52 times. So we're seeing, in terms of the kinds of chemicals that are being brought in through law enforcement. They say, well, what is this substance? Heroin is showing up at a rate that would lead to an approximately 33% increase over last year. Again, recognizing that because of our population size, those numbers can move a little bit more quickly than in larger states. I think on the enforcement side, I would just add, we're committed from the Attorney General's office to do what we can to support local governments and local law enforcement as they work through this challenge, because they're going to be the ones confronting it daily. I think from an enforcement tools standpoint, there's not something missing. I think the challenge for all of us is going to be the broader question. It's not a question it's a question for the legislature, but it's a question also for all of the state's leadership, which is how to prioritize resources in a time of shortfall. And but we're doing what we need to do here to ensure that we continue to have the resources to participate in this kind of enforcement work. With that, I don't have much more safe to say that I think one of the emphases as we move forward and for you all is that these stakeholder groups and some of these broader coalitions are going to be sort of going to be the vision for the policy making in addition to the involvement of this committee. And one of the interesting issues, and I think the reason why we don't have a committee for you right now already set up, is that we have an obligation to make sure that if we're going to have a committee that is properly staffed and that it's staffed with people who can identify and track and gather information in between meetings, and that also requires people to identify resources. And so I think that as that happens, we're going to see a lot more clarity for you about a path forward on specific recommendations. But in summary, I think the four that we're going to be talking about through this interim session and probably going forward are coroner reporting, the prescription drug monitoring program, naloxone availability, and other Good Samaritan laws.
All right, Mr. Nepper, we have a couple questions up here, Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Nepper, you mentioned that U.S.-wide there's 125 overdose deaths per year, 78 per day, yeah, and 78 opioids per day. What are the numbers for Wyoming? I assume those would be per year. That's the first question. And the second question, what prevents first responders from having Narcan as a standard drug in an ambulance to start with? What's preventing that right now?
I'm going to answer the two different questions. The first one is we don't know, and that's one of our challenges. We will get reports, and it's nobody's. Look, at the end of the day, there are counties in this state where the cause of death may be identified as drug overdose. But what we won't necessarily know is what kind of drug in certain circumstances. And in other cases, what we won't know is the kind of was this even a drug that the person was prescribed? In other words, this is somebody who was prescribed this hydrocodone, or is this hydrocodone that came from some other circumstance? And I think we have to acknowledge that some of that's just resources. I mean, it's not as though all of our county coroners who we rely on to gather this information and provide it are equally resourced, and in terms of their ability to run a whole battery of tests anytime somebody shows up with a death that is interesting in some way. So I mean, that's not to say they don't do great work. It's to say that we don't have that number for Wyoming, and I think that's one of the real reasons why the governor's office has become concerned about this, is because I think we're starting to see this opioid challenge migrating to Wyoming, but it's being cloaked right now outside of anecdotal stories. About 3 years ago, I was with some of the attorneys general for the northeastern United States, and they were just beside themselves with the challenge of heroin in their area of the country, where it truly is a dramatically devastating epidemic. And I remember coming home immediately from that conference and saying, talking to PCI and saying, is this what we're seeing? Because this is what they're seeing. We're just going to be later down the line when it starts to come to Wyoming. And at that time, the answer I got back was, yes, we're starting to see some, but methamphetamine is still the predominant substance abuse challenge in Wyoming in terms of its availability and its costs. Now, as far as availability in the first responder, I want to be careful. I'm not the expert on it. I think the challenge is not just the paramedics, but others who might show up on scene, such as law enforcement. I will have to check and get back to you on whether there is a specific reason, because I think you're right. There are other drugs that are regularly available in first responder packages. I'm not sure why this one would not be something that would be available in a paramedic's bag.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who's that? Representative Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, what is the cost right now of a Narcan kit, or whatever the other name is for it, naloxone? Number one, how much would a kit cost? Number two, do we have any numbers on how much it would cost to roll out a kit for each of our first responders across the state? Do we have any numbers on those kind of costs? and I'm not sure if this is for Ms. Panos or Mr. Nepper.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, I do not have that number, but it's certainly something that we could provide to you.
I have some information, but not the second number, which was what would be the cost statewide, because I think Representative Witters, you've absolutely hit the challenge. And it's the challenge not only of how much is it going to cost to make it available, but what's the expiration date for the particular treatment drug. For example, in parents with children with severe allergies often get pens with ephedrine, but for the possible exposure for their child, but those pens then have to be replaced at cost every 6 months as they expire, and I think that's one of the challenges. My understanding is that the injectable option which would be like an EpiPen, is quite expensive right now. It's a prescription drug with a prescription provider, a distributor. So we're looking in the multiple hundreds. I think Narcan and naloxone in the nasal spray is much less expensive, but I can't tell you exactly. I do know that Walgreens is committed to making it available in a number of states where they allow parents to purchase this, because that's one of the concerned groups. They want to be able to respond immediately when they know they have a child who is struggling with this kind of addiction. I think the number is $78, but I don't want to.